Over the past several years, a lot of the older members of the FNAF community have been feeling less than impressed with the current state of the franchise and more nostalgic for the story, tone, and aesthetic of the original first 3 to 4 games. You would think that these fans would eventually stop reminiscing about the old days and move on to something more suited to their age. Well, I'm sure some of them have, the majority of them haven't. What's keeping people so invested in this franchise that they claim to not even like anymore? With the release of the FNAF movie, and trust me, we'll talk about the movie, I think so, in this video, this issue instantly went from a 5.8 to an 8.7 really quickly. So I thought now would be just as good a time as any to talk about it. There are several reasons for everything I just mentioned, but one of the biggest contributors is a little thing called FNAF VHS, which draws heavily from another little thing called analog horror. Analog horror reproduces the experience of analog technology, as the name suggests. Wikipedia says it stems from the creepypasta era, and I find that very easy to believe. Creepypastas are essentially just scary stories on the internet that people spread around as if they're true. Think Goosebumps, but for the edgier kids who probably shouldn't have unrestricted internet access. Analog horror takes inspiration from creepypasta in its use of distorted faces and ideas of dangerous or corrupted visual media. Because one really common theme in creepypasta is the idea that watching this video will harm you in some immediate and dramatic way, or doom you to a horrific fate. This comes from creepypasta's original origin, chainmail. That's right, the roots of FNAF VHS go back to those stupid chain emails and letters. If you don't know, chainmail operates on fear. It always promises that something bad will happen to you if you don't send 10 other copies to other people. It's like a virus. It spreads by infecting a host, which then has to interact with and infect other hosts. But in this case, infecting means fooling someone. When the age of the internet came around, chainmail became more popular than ever in email form, where all you had to do was copy and paste the message and send it to others. The name of creepypasta is meant to sound like copypasta, which refers to any message commonly copied and pasted online. I'm assuming the common horror stories copied and pasted in some chain emails became popular and interesting enough for people to talk about and expand online, and they eventually developed into what we know as creepypasta. Creepypasta was a bit more refined than chainmail. Instead of just claiming that you're cursed if you read the message or see the content, it was more that the content was supposedly so graphic and disturbing that you might feel inclined to harm yourself after viewing the content. Many popular analog horror series like the Mandela Catalog, Local 58, and the FNAF VHS tapes operate on the same idea. Whatever you're watching or playing is somehow personalized to you. Instead of you just watching the screen, whatever is behind the screen is also watching you. YouTube channel Local 58's video, "You Are on the Fastest Available Route," looks like the first video to use this style in the same way that it's used today. The video shows very low quality footage of someone driving and using their GPS.
Proceed to the highlighted route. Continue on Holbrook Park Drive, then in 500 feet turn right onto North 38th Street. You will arrive at your destination in 2 hours and 28 minutes.
The only thing unsettling about the video is how silent everything is. The only voice you hear is the lifeless automated voice of the GPS telling you where to go. The GPS takes the driver into a forest. Up to this point, everything has been somewhat normal. It does seem like the GPS might be taking us to the wrong place, but at least it's operating in the way a GPS should. Until it says this.
In 300 feet, turn off your headlights.
That isn't right. Something is wrong. Right after the headlights go out, an unseen monster, it starts roaring.
Rerouting. Make a U-turn. Your destination is behind you. Rerouting. Your destination will be in 50 feet. You will arrive at your destination.
This video got a whole lot of attention because it was really unique and interesting at the time. Emphasis on at the time. A lot of analog horror follows what I'm going to call the analog horror checklist. The stuff on the checklist doesn't have to be there for it to be analog horror, but it will be there about 65% of the time. I did the math. The first element is definitely a requirement. The video has to have the look and feel of analog technology, like a really old camera, TV broadcast, and VHS tape. The content involves some kind of public service announcement, or at least some kind of anonymous authority figure, something like that. Most of the dialogue comes from an automated voice. Everything seems perfectly normal at first, but eventually some subtle visual or dialogue cue will show you that something is wrong. Once the initial disturbance shows up, everything starts escalating and becoming more and more obviously corrupt and hostile and distorted until the video ends. That sounds a little bit familiar. Grainy, staticky images and analog audio, with the only dialogue coming from an authority figure sounding completely benevolent until something they say starts to sound a bit off, after which everything else begins to escalate, leading up to one climactic moment. That is literally the FNAF game's horror formula. The first 3 FNAF games have the same type of loop every night. Everything starts out relatively normal as an authority figure introduces you to whatever establishment you're working at, until some of the things they say start sounding a little iffy, like the phone guy in FNAF 1 saying,
most people don't last this long.
And FNAF 2 phone guy saying,
I'll be honest, I never liked that puppet thing. It's always thinking.
Then the animatronics start acting erratic and aggressive. From the start, FNAF and analog horror were bound to come together at some point, because they're based on nearly the exact same fundamental ideas. Another important aspect of analog horror that I haven't mentioned yet is psychological horror. Psychological horror focuses on mental, emotional, and psychological states to frighten, disturb, or unsettle its audience. Another article mentions the big word that describes analog horror in a nutshell: paranoia. When I watch a good analog horror series like The Mandela Catalog, it leaves me looking around my room. It gives me this oppressive sense of being watched. It doesn't try to get me with shocking gore or intense jump scares. It focuses on the uncanny. A lot of this comes from the personalized feeling these videos try to create. The context of the video is usually that you're watching a tape and something evil is inside it. Something that can see you. Something that can change the nature and message of the content that should be in the tape. Which should be even less possible with this older technology that's much more physical in nature. This personalized feeling and focus on psychological horror is one of the big parts of the first few FNAF games that made them so popular, especially FNAF 2. FNAF 2 isn't, at least in my opinion, it isn't a scary game to play. The office is bright, the sound design is good but gets drowned out by all of the gameplay noises, and the characters are only unsettling in the cameras, which are completely useless to the gameplay in the later nights. But one thing FNAF 2 definitely has going for it are its pre-night cutscenes and rare death minigames. The pre-night cutscenes are from Freddy Fazbear's perspective. We can look left and right to see Bonnie and Chica next to us. This distorted, unsettling chant plays over the bleak ambience, and the squeaks of the chant get louder and longer, and strange electronic noises get louder until it ends. No jump scare to release the tension that was beginning to build up. This cutscene is all spooky and mysterious by itself, but in the context of the game, where children's souls are trapped in these robots, the cutscenes become even more terrifying. There's our psychological horror. Then there's the iconic 8-bit death minigames. Every time you die, you have a chance to get one of 4 different minigames. I would do an in-depth analysis of each minigame, but I think I'll save that for another video. All of the minigames have one goal: showing you, the player, what happened behind closed doors at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. We see dead children, empty suits, pools of blood on the floor, and a mysterious purple man, all while an electronic voice tries to communicate with us. It spells out words like save them, help them, and save him. It has that same personal feeling, because something is inhabiting the game and it knows we're here. This is one of the rare moments in FNAF that truly does its story justice, and one of the moments that helped popularize this subtle type of horror on the internet. The only critique I have of the 8-bit minigames is that most of them end with jump scares, the save them minigame being the only one that doesn't. I understand that the other 3 use jump scares to establish which animatronic was linked to each one, and it was a really smart way to subtly drop hints. But the end of the save them minigame hits so much harder when the words "you can't" have a chance of appearing as the game ends. It's those quiet, dark messages that speak the loudest in terms of horror in this case. FNAF 3 continued this trend and executed it extremely well, especially in the secret minigames. Each of them uses a beautifully simple song played on a music box, which would be more innocent in any other context, but it's tragic in this context. Now that we've established that FNAF was using analog horror elements before it was cool, let's get back to the future of the past, or something like that. After the success of Local 58's videos, other channels would follow in its footsteps. One of these channels was called Squimpus McGrimpus, the channel I'll be analyzing the most in this video, since it's the one that started it all. I will get into some other ones a little bit, but this is the one with the most fleshed out story, besides maybe the Walton Files, but I don't consider that to be FNAF VHS since it has its own story. It seems like Squimpus was the first person to realize that analog horror and FNAF were a match made in heaven, and people loved it. Nowadays, this name raises several red flags for those who know, because Squimpus ended up being exposed for doing some really awful stuff, to put it lightly. I'm not getting into the details of what happened in this video because I don't want people to think I'm exploiting this awful situation for ad revenue, but I will say this, he has admitted to being a child groomer. His channel is not monetized on YouTube, so watching or talking about his series does not benefit him monetarily in any way. July 25th, 2019. Fazbear Entertainment Video Manual. The video is only a minute long and is presented as a tape teaching employees to perform maintenance on an animatronic.
Reach behind their neck and press the red button. This will set them into maintenance mode. Remove the upper jaw carefully, then detach the lower jaw. Take the torso piece and lift it upward until it is completely removed. Climb inside the torso and accept your death.
Let's run it by the analog horror checklist. Grainy VHS audio and visual style, the video being played has some kind of official or authoritative nature, most of the dialogue is given by an automated voice, everything seems innocent until something you're told doesn't sound right, and what you see quickly starts becoming more and more intense, and everything builds up as if a jump scare or some release of tension is about to happen, but it never does. The video ends, leaving you right on the edge, still caught in suspense. This was the type of FNAF hardcore fans had missed ever since the third game was released over 4 years prior. 3 other videos were released the same day as the first, and Sound Response Check is a really interesting one, and not just because of the Gangnam Style meme. It shows Withered Chica across from us as we play different audio cues. The tape tells us how she should respond after the audio plays. Everything goes as it should, until the tape says, we cut back to Chica, and she starts telling us about how the music that's playing makes her feel better. She says she saw a bird asleep in the snow one time, and that she feels like she's asleep in snow, that she can't breathe. Then a ghostly apparition of a girl shows up next to her, and the tape cuts to an image of a bird asleep in the snow. This video was novel and terrifying because it was one of the first to explore the horror of what the children possessing the animatronics were feeling. We've never heard them speak directly to us in this way, describing how painfully aware yet awfully confused they are. They've never been portrayed as thinking like the young children they were when their lives ended, and it's an absolutely horrifying idea. This is why FNAF VHS became so popular. It wasn't just, oh look, it's a scary picture of a ghost kid. It began with amazing storytelling that expanded on this oversaturated story in a completely new way. The next video, which shows the video that played on TVs outside Foxy's Cove before it started, is another highlight of the series. It draws inspiration from the Foxy Go 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 minigame from FNAF 2, in the way that the mascots keep repeating what they always do, but something is wrong with the audience. After each performance of the pre-show, another child disappears, but the show goes on. This episode introduces the frantic nature of the children, with violently quick movements flashing across the screen in an unhinged way, and the words go 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 on top of everything. Purple Guy is a small figure, hiding in the background, but you can tell that he is the one with power in this situation. The video ends with a sped up song playing faintly as Foxy watches Fredbear hanging on a purple thread, struggling with the same manic energy from earlier in the video. I think this is supposed to be a hint towards how the kid who possesses Golden Freddy died in this version of the story, and it's haunting to imagine William making sure he did the deed right in front of Foxy, as if he loves the idea of doing what he does in front of someone else, a sick form of playing pretend. Nonexistent video is presented as the 5th tape in a collection of 4 tapes. It's revealed that Michael is the one collecting these tapes, and the puppet is communicating to him through the tapes. The puppet believes that Michael can help all of them, but Michael is afraid his brother won't forgive him. Charlie is more optimistic and tells him that he's good. Charlie also tells Michael what happened to his father, and what he has to do. We're taken to Fazbear Frights, the horror attraction full of old Freddy's memorabilia that eventually includes the suit containing the man himself. The next video is Night Security Training video. It follows the analog horror formula as usual, with its signature awkward pauses here and there.
There should be a map of the restaurant on the bottom right corner. Pressing the buttons on the map will change the...
Eventually, Springtrap shows up.
Pressing the white button will activate the light set outside the door, illuminating a...
Next, we have facial recognition testing. A man records himself testing out Toy Bonnie's facial recognition technology by showing him alternating images of innocents and criminals. He takes special notice in the last photo.
Criminal. Innocent. What's this doing here?
And apparently Toy Bonnie does too, because he charges towards him. We then cut to this image, with these words repeating.
Criminal, 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 criminal.
This is the purple guy, the man who caused all of this pain and misfortune. Security footage.mp4 shows us a conversation between Bonnie and Chica. It seems like Lucas, the kid possessing Bonnie, was a bit older than Susie because he's less optimistic and has a greater understanding of their fate. He knows that as things currently stand, they're stuck here indefinitely. They can only hope that giving the man who hurt them what he deserves will set their spirits free. Company PSA is a tape intended for Fazbear Entertainment employees to watch, presumably after the Bite of 83. They've added new characters and rearranged the layout of the dining area in a desperate attempt to rebrand after tragedy. The tape tells employees what to say if anyone asks about what happened to Fredbear and Spring Bonnie.
Where did Fredbear and Spring Bonnie go? Who are these new characters? In a situation where you are asked anything along these lines, here is what you say in reply. Fredbear does not exist. Spring Bonnie does not exist. Nothing happened to anyone.
Instead of acknowledging and apologizing for the accident, Fazbear Entertainment is doing everything they can to cover it up. They don't want to set things right, they want to sweep it all under the rug.
He does not exist.
We've seen the Fredbear animatronic before, but we've never heard what he has to say. This is what we know as Golden Freddy. For anyone who doesn't know, the Fredbear animatronic / Golden Freddy is the animatronic that Michael shoved his younger brother into its mouth, and the tears of his younger brother caused the spring locks to go off and the mouth clamped down, and that caused the Bite of 87 and Michael's younger brother possessing the Fredbear animatronic. He's been thrown to the darkest corner of the establishment and he knows it, but he's not going down quietly. This is the vengeful spirit. He doesn't believe that Michael would ever try to help him. We'll see more of that in the next video. Animated cartoon expands on the same characters and concepts. We see the 4 main Freddy's characters acting like cartoon characters until they realize they have 2 extra seats set up.
Hey, Freddy? This was just now occurring to me, but why do we got 6 chairs when there's only 4 of us?
You know, I don't actually have an answer for that.
Not even a sarcastic one. Tell me to shut up!
Shut up.
Ah, the balance has been restored.
They feel like someone is missing, and it throws off the cartoon. Chica suddenly says she has to go, and heads to one of the back rooms. She finds a poster featuring the 4 main characters, along with the silhouettes of 2 other characters. She turns as she hears something behind her, then leaves the room. A blue orb hovers in a doorway, then goes through it, and Chica follows. A video of a field starts playing with peaceful music, and an extremely ugly render of the Fredbear plush floats up to the top of the screen, with "Tomorrow is Another Day" showing up in a pretty font. This feels like some strange type of propaganda. It's unnaturally optimistic, and it doesn't make sense with this nasty looking bear with undersized ears sitting on top of it. It's something ugly trying to look pretty and appealing, and we got here by way of a jarring transition from a previously unsettling situation. All goes silent, then the music becomes frantically tragic. Everything burns behind Fredbear, and he tells us what he believes to be the brutal, honest truth. We're never getting out. We can't sweep it under the rug. You can't just hide things like this. The sadistic laughter from the FNAF 4 minigames accompanies the Foxy mask on the screen, but this time the puppet is next to it. This is meant to show that Charlie and Michael are working together and Fredbear is addressing them. He tells Charlie that she's only making things worse for everyone, and there's no way Michael has changed. He tells the other children that there's no way out. They're trapped here forever. He's just the only one that's accepted it. But he falters a bit at the end. After he asks them to accept that they're trapped, he says this. Once again, he's still a child. I keep mentioning that the animatronics act like children because it's the one element that's almost entirely missing from the game lore. I don't think it's because Scott hasn't thought to add this element to his story. There seems to be an explanation for why the body horror of being trapped in a giant metal robot isn't focused on in the games. In Ultimate Custom Night, the puppet says,
"The others are like animals, but I am very aware.
I'm doing everything I can to resist talking about Gibby's good idea, bad idea 9-hour video that quite possibly solved most of the lore of FNAF 1 through 8, but instead I'll just say what I mean in the shortest way possible. In the games, only a few of the spirits fully retain their identity and humanity after death. This idea might even be hinted at in the dream sequences in the FNAF movie. We see the kids' faces blurring in and out while they stare at Mike. This happens to every kid except the kid possessing Golden Freddy, who is also the only one of the 5 kids who actually speaks to Mike. Something about the Golden Freddy kid makes him more in control of himself. His soul is somehow more complete. A majority of the souls in the game are in this incomplete state, and therefore aren't actively experiencing as much pain as characters like Elizabeth, Cassidy, William, and Charlie. The FNAF VHS series highlights the body horror aspect of FNAF, while Scott's game series mostly doesn't. Scott didn't want to go in this direction, and that's okay. If you watch that 9-hour video after finishing this video, it'll show you what Scott was focusing on with the series and why he didn't really have time to explore every single element. Now for the final 2 and longest videos in the series. These mostly serve to build William's character. The penultimate video shows some fairly innocuous images taken when Freddy's was in its prime, until we get to the image of Spring Bunny. Everything goes dark and silent until William Afton starts talking.
You just found a cassette tape hidden in my bedroom. Isn't that strange? A man like William Afton, someone so simple and plain, hiding a cassette tape. Why would he be hiding anything?
This is the first time we've really gotten to hear William talk in any meaningful way. Yeah, this isn't official, and yeah, we've heard brief voice lines from William in the games, but they've never really given him anything close to a fleshed out character. So this is definitely something new.
You've heard of the somewhat recent happenings with Freddy at Fazbear's Pizza. 3 cases of 1 and 1 case of 2. All of them adding up to the 5 missing children of Freddy's. That was me.
Squempus does something very interesting here, by what I assume to be some biblical symbolism. I'm probably making a breakdown of biblical parallels in the FNAF lore soon, so consider this a brief little teaser for what that video will sound like. William starts talking about Michael, how he was the one who caused the buy of 83, which was one of the driving forces behind William's depraved actions.
See, Mike wasn't settled with being the failure, and how I loved Joseph just so much more, so he tormented him, eventually killing him. And that's why I didn't love him in the first place. He was always a terrible kid, not worth my time. But now I hate him more than I ever have.
This sounds a lot like the story of Joseph and his brothers in Genesis. Joseph had 11 brothers, but his father, Israel, loved Joseph more than the others, and he made it obvious by giving Joseph special treatment. The brothers were understandably envious, and this jealousy grew until they decided to kill Joseph. They didn't end up killing him, they sold him to some slave traders instead, but they told their father that Joseph was killed in an accident. In this version of the lore, at least according to William, Michael was jealous of his brother's favor with his father, so he bullied him and put him in Fredbear's mouth, which led to his death. Michael claims he didn't mean to hurt Joseph, but William doesn't believe him. The amount of character and depth this video adds to the Aftons and the overall story is incredible.
Ever since he killed him, I've wanted to put my hands around his neck and just squeeze the life out of his lungs, but of course if I ever did that, I'd get caught. Then I had an idea. Maybe it didn't necessarily have to be Michael. It could be any other brand, as long as I like them. I went up there about 4 times, picked the worst kids of the bunch, took them back, and I gave it to him.
He even tries to justify what he did by calling the kids the worst ones of the bunch. He ends the tape with a threat addressed directly to Michael, with Springtrap lurking in the background.
Now that you've heard this, you should know that I check this spot every day to see if this tape is moved. I've seen it so many times, I'll be able to notice even the slightest difference. I will know. So you better put it back, Michael, as neatly as you can, and start running.
The last tape, Finale, starts in the safe room in a Freddy's location that William is trapped in after being springlocked. The voice acting for Afton, I have to say, is phenomenal.
I'm trapped. The locks went off while I was wearing it. They probably think I'm still dead, or they just hate me that much. They really are just like him. They deserved it.
You can tell he's still holding on to his bitterness toward Michael and his love for the only person he cares about at this point, Joseph. He's losing his mind here. Every one of his psychotic tendencies only becomes more intense the longer he stays here. He goes from screaming Michael's name in a plea for help to saying that he's going to kill him. Yelling at Michael apparently isn't an unusual activity for William.
Oh, how I miss the way you used to cry when I screamed at you. It's going to get so much worse.
After being trapped in the safe room for 9 years, we hear him losing his will to speak, to think, to even exist.
Another year, I don't know. I've lost track of time. I can't.
The only thing keeping his soul on this side of reality is his hatred. In 2008, William was moved to Fazbear Frights. He knew Michael well enough to know that he would get there eventually.
Come on, Michael. Come visit me. I know you'll do it. She'll make you do it.
5 minutes into the video, we get the hardest line of the episode.
I see you.
Charlie warns Michael that he's close, as we hear Springtrap's footsteps approaching.
Hello.
It's over. The years of birth and death of all the missing children flash across the screen. These give us a few surprising and important details at the very end. Charlie is one of the 5 missing children in this interpretation of the lore, and the first missing child listed, Nicole Morales, was 15 years old, nearly the same age Michael was in 1983. The other children were 11 or younger, implying that William may have decided that teenagers were too capable of fighting back. Too risky to go after, even if they were closer to the age of the one he really wanted to hurt. It all ends with Michael and Joseph Afton, the only grave with an epitaph, together again in forgiveness and peace. We never see Joseph forgive Michael, and he didn't seem inclined to the last time we heard him speak, but it seems like he did end up forgiving his brother. The story ends at Fazbear Frights, where the man who set this all in motion was defeated. But that man wouldn't have put the blame on himself. He blamed it all on Michael to the very end, refusing to believe it was an accident, refusing to forgive, and causing all of this pain as a result. He let his own grief and anger destroy his family and bleed over into 4 others. Just under 2 years after the original FNAF VHS series, a creator named Baddington decided to remake the series. Because of Baddington's years of experience creating horror animations, I would definitely say that his series takes the original and significantly improves it. Actually getting to see these characters performing and moving around for extended periods of time makes it feel like these are real found tapes from a forgotten era. Baddington's character design is the highlight of the series. The characters he created look much more like real 80s mascots than the ones from the games, and that realism makes it all the more terrifying. It makes the series feel even more like a creative spin on the original content. Baddington covered the series up to episode 5, Nonexistent video, before he was asked to stop recreating the series. I would recommend watching all of his FNAF VHS videos instead of the ones by Squimpus, since they offer the same great story with some slight alterations, along with much more interesting visuals. If you like the originals, you'll probably like Baddington's better. After the success of Baddington's remakes, many more FNAF VHS channels started popping up. There are way too many for me to keep up with at this point, especially since I have a feeling a lot of these won't have a whole lot of new things to offer. I'm not saying they're unoriginal, but there's only so many times you can see the same events fully realized in 3D before they start to lose their flair. And I have yet to see a channel rival the character design and overall visual flair of Baddington's videos. Overall, the FNAF VHS series show the power of silence and stillness and horror. It's not all about the extremely stimulating and tense moments. They only mean something when there's silence, when you have to wait for them, wondering when they'll show up. A lot of the newer FNAF projects like Security Breach and Ruin seem to be missing that element, that thing that initially made the first 3 games so intriguing. It wasn't about the jump scares, it was about the moments in between, the uncanny moments when you aren't sure if you imagine an image in the shadows, a sound next to your office. These videos in the first game are like being in a dark room as a scared little kid. Everything is perfectly still and mostly quiet, but you have a sinking feeling that something is just about to go horribly wrong. that something will jump out and get you. And here's the difference between the original game and the VHS series. The VHS series never gives you the mercy of a jump scare. A jump scare is the way out of the bad dream. It's what reminds you that if your character dies, it's all over. It's the worst thing that can happen. That's what made analog horror so interesting in the beginning. There was never a climax, a moment where the creator showed you everything that they could do. In these videos, you've never seen the worst of it. The storytelling in Squimpus and Baddington's original videos are fantastic because they add to the source material in a way that makes it even more interesting. They show just how dark the FNAF premise can be if it wants to be. Nowadays, some people find it hard to take analog horror seriously, since the premise has been thoroughly oversaturated to the point of exhaustion, the thing that happens to pretty much every internet trend. It's at the point where there appear to be two different kinds of FNAF fans. The older, or just edgier fans, who want every game to be gory and look like FNAF VHS, and then there are the fans who like the fandom for its goofier side, the fans who like Security Breach. Obviously that's an exaggerated idea. Some people like me are somewhere on the spectrum in between those two, but there is some truth to it, because you probably lean more toward one side than the other. The issue with all of this is that it gives people this expectation that this is what official FNAF media should look like. The first few games had some elements that were kind of similar, so that means that they need to make that their entire personality. The problem is that this isn't Scott's style. It isn't what he wants to make, and it isn't what he likes to make. The problem isn't that Scott doesn't know how to make another 8-bit minigame with distorted audio. The problem is that the fans think that FNAF would be fixed if Scott or Steelwool just took inspiration from Baddington or others like him. The truth is, I'm not sure how the analog horror style would translate into game form. It works best in small doses. I don't doubt that people could pull off a great game made in this style, but that doesn't mean it would have the same feeling that these videos set up. I think this type of visual style works best in Easter egg form, which is something Scott pulled off really well in the first 3 games, with things like this, having a very rare chance to show up with this sound playing, and of course the Golden Freddy Easter egg combined with the distorted vocals and hallucinations. The important thing to remember that everyone seems to forget is, this isn't FNAF. As much as you may want it to be, this isn't FNAF. It's an elaboration on the premise that Scott Cawthon introduced. Is it better than FNAF? That's up to you and your opinion. I do believe that it explores the world and story of FNAF more effectively and with greater focus and intensity than Scott did, but instead of this constant grieving and complaining about how much better FNAF would be if it was like what Baddington makes, go make something better. If you think you know how to make FNAF better, try your own take on the story or the gameplay. I love this fandom too, and I would love to see FNAF take itself more seriously. But as things stand, it doesn't make sense to wait around for FNAF to reach its full potential, or what you think is its full potential. Go find or create the next big horror franchise. FNAF VHS shows what all of you, all of us as a community are capable of. In other words, together, we are FNAF. Thanks for watching. Before I go, shout out to the beautiful channel members, and if you like this video, you might like my big supercut compilation of my favorite FNAF fan game videos of the year.